Ryan had always lived in a world where his wishes became reality. Since childhood, he never had to deal with limits. His wealthy parents ensured that he lacked nothing: money, opportunities, elite education, and even adventures that would make any young person envious. Ryan had it all. His confidence wasn't born solely from his attractive appearance, with piercing blue eyes and a charismatic smile, but also from a deep conviction that he was special. He believed that success was his birthright, a natural consequence of his superiority. In his early 30s, Ryan was at the peak. He had founded a tech company that revolutionized how people connected, and it had brought him not only an immeasurable fortune, but also fame. The media adored him. He was constantly described as the visionary genius of a new era. At gala events, he was surrounded by admirers and business people wanting a piece of his glow. In everyone's eyes, he had a perfect life. But Ryan knew that something was missing, not because he truly felt the absence, but because to him success was incomplete without a beautiful woman by his side, like a display piece still missing in the perfect show of his life. Ryan wanted a girlfriend, but not just any girlfriend. He wanted someone who would complement his public image: young, beautiful, simple, and, above all, moldable. He didn't want a partner who would bring complications, who had dreams or opinions that could interfere with his plans. He needed someone who was like an elegant painting, capable of adorning his life without challenging him. He wanted someone easy to control, who would accept his terms without question, and who would be willing to follow him unconditionally, just like so many of his employees and followers already did. That was when the idea of a dating contest emerged. Ryan wanted to make his choice efficient and at the same time entertaining. For him, the idea of women competing for his heart was intriguing, almost like a sport that he could enjoy from the best seat as the absolute judge of his own preferences. He would turn the selection of his partner into a grand event, a carefully planned competition where the candidates would spend a week in his luxurious mansion, participating in activities, challenges, and dynamics created by him, all to prove who had what it took to be by his side. To Ryan, this plan was genius. First, he could evaluate the women's behavior in situations he orchestrated himself, observing who could handle his lifestyle and who would not fit in. Second, he knew that the media would love to cover the event, and he loved the idea of his name once again appearing on magazine covers and news websites. He saw no problem in turning his life into a public spectacle. On the contrary, it only fed his ego. So he announced the proposal, and the response was even greater than he expected. The news went viral. Millionaire announces contest to choose a girlfriend. Candidates will compete for Ryan's heart. Social media exploded with comments. Some criticized it, calling the proposal misogynistic and outdated, while others applauded, treating it as a curious and eccentric game. And then there were those who simply wanted to participate, eager to be at the center of the luxury and fame he offered. Ryan didn't care about the criticism. He saw envy as merely a confirmation of his value. With the registrations open, Ryan found himself flooded with thousands of candidates, each with her own dream of being chosen. He personally selected a few, based on photos and brief information. He only wanted the most beautiful and attractive women. To him, the selection criteria needed to be nothing deeper than that. Ryan had already decided that, by the end of the contest, he would find someone who fit perfectly into his mold. A beautiful woman he could display at events and use as proof of how complete his success was. Nothing seemed to be out of his control. He had the money, the fame, the power, and now he was about to find the final piece that was missing from the perfect puzzle of his life. However, what Ryan didn't know yet was that the idea of choosing a partner the same way one might choose a product was about to be challenged. He was about to discover that sometimes what we think we control is, in reality, what controls us the most. And that love, that feeling he thought to be superficial and irrelevant, could not be manipulated as he imagined. The week of the competition finally arrived. Ryan's mansion, a grand estate with imposing columns, well-kept gardens, and a pool that looked more like a private lake, was ready to receive the candidates. He had hired a team of organizers to ensure that everything was perfect, from the decorations to the luxurious accommodations that would make the women feel like they were in a real-life fairy tale. Nothing was left to chance. Ryan liked absolute control, and this event was a way to demonstrate once again his power and ability to manipulate those around him. The participants began to arrive, each more glamorous than the last. They were models, actresses, influencers, women who, beyond their beauty, carried hopes and dreams. Each had her own strategy to impress Ryan. Some wore outfits that showed off their best physical features, while others invested in a more intellectual approach, trying to appear sophisticated. But they all shared a common desire: to be chosen by the millionaire. Ryan, surrounded by friends and colleagues who were equally wealthy, watched from an elevated balcony as the women were welcomed by the organizers. His gaze was critical, analytical. To him, it was a game, almost like selecting products off a shelf. He evaluated them the same way he would evaluate possible investments, with detachment, looking for the one that would best fit his luxurious and uncomplicated lifestyle. But among the many glamorous women who arrived, something stood out, but not for the reasons Ryan desired. A different woman appeared, being helped down from the van by one of the assistants. It was Rachel, a young woman with gentle features and an authentic smile, seated in a wheelchair. Unlike the others, she did not seem concerned with impressing anyone with her appearance. Her clothes were simple, practical, and her eyes conveyed a mixture of curiosity and determination. Ryan was surprised and at first a little annoyed. Who was she? He quickly searched his memory for why this woman was there. He vaguely remembered seeing her name among the hundreds of candidates, but the truth was he hadn't paid attention. To him, the idea of someone in a wheelchair participating in the contest was clearly off the mark. He didn't want complications, and someone with special needs seemed exactly the opposite of what he desired for his perfect life. The organizers, trained to ensure that everyone felt welcome, quickly adapted to Rachel's presence, offering support and showing her to her room. Ryan, watching everything from a distance, rolled his eyes and had already decided she wouldn't be a serious candidate. To him, Rachel was there by mistake, and she stood no chance of making it to the final stage. It was only a matter of time before she realized she didn't belong there, he thought. As the first few days went by, the activities at the mansion began. Ryan had planned a series of challenges: formal dinners where the women needed to demonstrate good manners, dynamics where they had to prove they could handle high-pressure situations, and even physical tests to evaluate stamina and skill. Ryan wanted more than just beauty. He wanted to see which of them could navigate his world without faltering, without showing weakness. In the first events, Rachel didn't get much of Ryan's attention. He saw her interacting with the other candidates and, in a way, admired that she seemed comfortable, even knowing she didn't fit the traditional profile of the contest. She made no exaggerated efforts to please him, didn't smile more than necessary, nor did she try to impress him with empty compliments. To Ryan, it was confusing. He was used to seeing women fighting for his attention, not someone who seemed indifferent. But the turning point happened during one of the first general knowledge challenges. Ryan, always confident in his own intelligence, loved testing the capacities of the women around him. He proposed a quiz, something that could show who had more than just a pretty face. While most of the candidates hesitated, fearful of giving the wrong answer, Rachel quickly raised her hand and began to answer a difficult question about the global economy, a field that for Ryan had always been a symbol of power and prestige. Rachel not only answered correctly, but also gave a detailed explanation, and her tone was so assured that everyone around went silent. For the first time, Ryan found himself paying attention. It wasn't just what she said, but how she said it, without hesitation, with clarity and intelligence. She wasn't trying to please him. She was simply being herself. Ryan couldn't help but feel a twinge of curiosity. Who was this woman, really? And why, despite everything he always believed about appearances and superficiality, was something about her attracting him? This moment made Ryan start to see Rachel differently. He wasn't in love, not yet, not even close. But there was something about her that challenged his preconceived ideas. She wasn't what he imagined as perfect, but perhaps that was exactly what made him start questioning his own vision of perfection. She didn't fit into any of the molds he had established, and strangely, that made her all the more intriguing. By the end of that first day of challenges, Ryan found himself reflecting on Rachel. He still refused to admit any interest, but knew he needed to pay more attention to her. Something inside him, even if he was reluctant to accept it, was starting to change. He didn't know yet, but this was only the beginning of a deep process of transformation. What had once been just a contest to satisfy his ego was beginning to transform into something he could never have predicted. The initial days of the competition were proving different from what Ryan had expected. He had imagined it would be easy to pick a few candidates, eliminate those who didn't fit his superficial ideal, and move forward until he was left with just one winner who would be the perfect girlfriend to accompany him in his luxurious and controlled life. But Rachel was an element he hadn't foreseen, and it was starting to affect him in ways he couldn't quite understand. The competition continued, and in each activity Rachel stood out, not for being the most glamorous or for trying the hardest to please, but for her intelligence, her authenticity, and her quiet strength that seemed to disarm even the other competitors. During an afternoon dedicated to a team problem-solving activity, Ryan watched from afar, intrigued. It was an exercise in teamwork. The women were challenged to solve a complex puzzle while working together. Unlike the others, who were trying to attract the spotlight, Rachel was focused on what needed to be done, organizing tasks, motivating others, and guiding the group as a true leader. She demonstrated qualities that Ryan had always valued in himself but had never looked for in another person. Leadership, emotional intelligence, calm under pressure. Rachel was everything he hadn't known he was looking for. He had expected to find someone who was just a beautiful adornment for his life, but Rachel, in an unexpected way, was proving to be more. She didn't need him. She wasn't desperately seeking his attention, and that made her all the more intriguing. Her confidence stood in stark contrast to the submissive approach of many of the other participants, and that difference made Ryan, despite himself, feel drawn to her. One evening there was a formal dinner, the candidates dressed in stunning gowns, all with the intention of impressing Ryan. The grand table of the mansion was covered with flowers, candles, and gleaming cutlery, creating a glamorous atmosphere that was part of Ryan's plan, to impress and also to feel in total control. Ryan, seated at the head of the table, initiated a conversation to test the women's cultural knowledge. He asked questions about art history, wines, and exotic places he had visited. The responses were mostly monosyllabic, filled with nervousness and anxiety to please him. When it was Rachel's turn, she surprised everyone. When asked about a classic painting that Ryan mentioned, she not only gave the correct answer, but also began to talk about the historical context of the work, the painter's technique, and the social impact of that art at the time. She spoke with passion, as someone who truly understood the value of things beyond the surface. What was a game for Ryan was for her genuine pleasure. The other women around the table fell silent, some clearly uncomfortable, but Rachel didn't seem to notice or care. She was just being authentic, and something happened at that moment. Ryan, for the first time, felt an uncomfortable sense of vulnerability. He realized that while he was trying to impress with his superficial knowledge to reaffirm his superiority, Rachel disarmed him with something much deeper. She genuinely cared and wasn't playing the game he thought he controlled. He found himself speechless for a few seconds, which was rare. Rachel's eyes met his directly, not with defiance, but with a serenity that was almost disconcerting. After dinner, Ryan withdrew to the terrace of the mansion. He needed a moment to process what he was feeling. He had always prided himself on being a logical man, focused on results and goals. Beautiful women had always been easy to understand. He knew what they wanted and, in return, offered status and a life of luxury. But Rachel, with her wheelchair and her unpretentious manner, was undoing all his certainties. But his immediate reaction was to close himself off. Ryan still refused to admit any feelings other than the control he had always had. He didn't want to be captivated by someone who didn't fit into what he had idealized, so he decided that he would be more critical of her, try to provoke her, challenge her confidence. He wanted to see how far Rachel's strength went. If she showed vulnerability, maybe he could convince himself that his impressions were wrong. And so Ryan began planning the next challenge in a somewhat manipulative way. The idea was to expose everyone's weaknesses, especially Rachel's. He organized a physical skills test, something that he knew would be difficult for her, a sort of obstacle course involving running, climbing, and activities where Rachel would clearly be at a disadvantage. Internally, he justified to himself that this was a test to see her real strength, but deep down, he wanted to push her away from the pedestal she had unwillingly built in his mind. Ryan decided to follow through with his plan to challenge her, believing that he could prove to himself that his feelings for Rachel were nothing more than a passing curiosity. So he planned a physical challenge for the next day, an obstacle course in his vast gardens. It was an obviously unfair test for Rachel, who was in a wheelchair. He knew that, but went ahead, convinced that this would be a way to reaffirm his convictions about the type of woman he wanted by his side. When the day arrived, the participants gathered at the starting point, all wearing sports outfits and ready to compete. Rachel was among them, calmly observing the obstacles, running tracks, ramps, low walls, and objects to climb over. Ryan approached the group, wearing a smile that, to anyone on the outside, seemed motivational, but to Rachel, sounded almost challenging. "All right, ladies, today we're going to test endurance and determination," Ryan announced, his voice full of confidence. He paused and looked directly at Rachel, his eyes searching for any sign of weakness. "I hope everyone is ready to give their best. Of course, some of you might find it difficult, but that's what we're here to see, isn't it?" Rachel simply smiled in response, a calm smile but with a spark of defiance that Ryan didn't expect. She didn't respond with words, but her expression said it all. She wasn't there to give up. The other women around, some clearly worried about the difficulty of the test, looked at Rachel with a mixture of curiosity and surprise. The challenge began, and as expected, Rachel fell behind during the running portion. Ryan watched from an elevated spot alongside some wealthy friends and the filming crew that was documenting every moment of the competition. The other women struggled to run, jumping over obstacles with difficulty, while Rachel took an alternative route, pushing her wheelchair with impressive strength. She went around obstacles, used auxiliary ramps, and sometimes even had to ask for help to overcome more challenging terrain. And each time that happened, she didn't show frustration, only focus and determination. At a certain point, one of the candidates, named Emily, tripped on a stone while running and fell, clearly in pain. Rachel, who was a bit behind, stopped. She turned to Emily and, without hesitation, began to approach. "Are you okay?" Rachel asked, her voice full of genuine concern. Emily, with her ankle hurt, looked at Rachel, a bit surprised by her attitude. While all the other participants were focused on winning, Rachel was more interested in helping. Ryan watched the scene from a distance, and, although part of him wanted Rachel to keep going and prove she couldn't overcome the obstacles, another part felt a growing discomfort. It was the first time he had seen someone prioritize another's well-being over competing to impress him. "Come on, I'll help you get to the end," Rachel said, taking Emily's hand. With the help of one of the organizers, Emily managed to lean on Rachel's wheelchair, and they continued the course together, moving more slowly but without hesitation. When they finally reached the end of the challenge, Ryan came down to meet them, visibly confused. He approached them both, and there was something different in his expression, a mix of admiration and discomfort. He looked at Rachel, then at Emily, who was still visibly in pain. "Why did you do that?" Ryan asked Rachel, trying to keep a neutral tone, though he was filled with curiosity. "You knew it would only slow you down, right?" Rachel looked up at him, her eyes meeting his firmly. "I'm not here just to win a title, Ryan," she responded calmly, but with a touch of intensity. "I'm here to be true to myself. And honestly, helping someone is much more important to me than trying to prove something to you or anyone else." Ryan was speechless for a moment. That answer hit his pride like a punch. He had always believed the world was about competition, about winning and being the best. And now he was facing someone who challenged him not with strength or physical ability, but by being so different from everything he knew. By being, in some way, better than him at what really mattered. While the other candidates gathered around, some clearly impressed by what had happened, Ryan walked away, as if needing a moment to process. He entered the mansion, headed for his office, and closed the door behind him. He sat down in his leather chair and took a deep breath. For the first time in a long time, he was feeling something he couldn't define, something that mixed admiration, discomfort, and a certain vulnerability. Rachel wasn't what he had expected. She wasn't someone he could control or mold. She wasn't there to flatter him or prove herself according to the standards he had set. She was there as a reminder that a person's worth couldn't be measured only by appearance, power, or the ability to fit in. And Ryan was beginning to realize that perhaps the problem wasn't Rachel fitting into his life, but him feeling small next to someone with such greatness of spirit. While he reflected on all of this, there was a knock on the door. It was Rachel, who had decided to speak to him without ceremony. Upon entering, she found him there, seated, and without hesitation asked, "Why did you do that?" She looked at him with a seriousness that dismantled any defenses. "Why plan a challenge that was clearly unfair for me?" Ryan hesitated, looking at her. He could lie, could say it was a test to see her strength, but he knew Rachel wouldn't accept empty answers. He took a deep breath. "Maybe I wanted to test you to see if you'd give up," he admitted, his voice carrying a mix of sincerity and arrogance that he couldn't quite control. "I thought that if it was hard enough, you'd realize this isn't for you." Rachel crossed her arms, her eyes fixed on his. "You know, Ryan, it's funny how you think everything is about proving something to you, but I'm not here for you. I'm here for myself. I don't need your approval to know my worth, and I won't give up just because someone thinks I should." And once again, Ryan was left without a response. He watched as Rachel left the office, her presence leaving a void, but also an uncomfortable truth echoing inside him. For the first time, he felt truly challenged, not by strength, but by realizing how much he still needed to grow. The following days at the mansion passed by like a blur for Ryan. He found himself constantly thinking about Rachel, something he couldn't have predicted or controlled. That conversation in his office, the way she faced his questions without hesitation, and more than that, the fact that she wasn't interested in pleasing him or proving anything to him, all of this intrigued him deeply. Ryan had never met anyone like her, someone who wasn't willing to bend to meet others' expectations, especially his own. He tried to keep his focus on the challenges and activities, but each time he looked at Rachel, it was as if something inside him shifted. She continued to participate in the activities in the most natural way possible, always helping whoever needed it, without worrying about the fact that they were technically in a competition. Gradually, the other participants also began to respect her and be inspired by her, which only made Ryan even more impressed. He, who had created this entire event to feed his ego and choose a suitable woman, was realizing that something much bigger was happening there. One day, while the group was relaxing by the pool, Ryan gathered his courage and approached Rachel, who was sitting near the edge, reading a book. He approached slowly, feeling the curious gazes of the other women on him. He crouched down beside her, trying to look relaxed, but his nerves were on edge. "Are you enjoying the book?" Ryan asked, trying to sound casual. Rachel looked up at him over her reading glasses, surprised by his approach. She gave a small smile and closed the book, showing him the cover. It was a philosophy classic. "I am, yes. I find it fascinating how some ideas can transcend time and apply to what we live today," she replied, and then added in a light-hearted way, "I didn't think you'd be interested in philosophy, Ryan." Ryan let out a short laugh, a bit nervous. "Well, I admit it's not something I usually read," he confessed, running his hand through his hair in a gesture that betrayed his discomfort. "But lately it seems I've been thinking about things that didn't matter much to me before." Rachel raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued, but also slightly amused. She gestured to the space next to her. "Well then, sit down. Maybe it's a good time to start thinking more about these things." Ryan hesitated for a moment, but then sat down beside her, crossing his legs. He looked at the pool, then at Rachel, who was relaxed, and asked, "Do you think I'm an idiot for organizing all of this?" The question came out before he could stop it, and he was surprised by how personal it was. Rachel observed him for a moment, weighing her words. She finally saw the vulnerability Ryan seemed to hide so well behind all his arrogance. "I don't know if idiot is the right word," she began, a soft smile on her lips. "I think you were trying to find something that maybe you didn't even know what it was. You live in a world where everything is about control, success, and having things the way you want. I think it's natural in that context to try to pursue even love as if it were something to be conquered." Ryan nodded, feeling a pang in his chest. It wasn't easy hearing those words, but there was something in them that touched him deeply. "And you?" Ryan asked. "Why did you come here?" Rachel took a deep breath, looking at the shimmering pool water. For a moment, it seemed like she was deciding whether to be completely honest or not. "I came here because I wanted to challenge myself," she finally said. "I've gone through a lot of difficult things in my life, and this seemed like another chance to prove to myself that nothing, not even physical obstacles, could define or limit me. And besides," she paused, looking directly at Ryan, "I wanted to show that a person's worth isn't in what they can flaunt, but in who they truly are. I thought maybe someone here needed to understand that." Ryan was silent for a moment, absorbing those words. For the first time in a long time, he felt small, but not in a negative way. It was as if he was learning something new about himself, and in some way, it was liberating. "I think I never stopped to think about that," he said, his voice softer than usual. "I've always been so focused on being the best, on having the best things, that I forgot to just be myself." Rachel smiled, a genuine smile that brought an unexpected warmth to Ryan's heart. "It's never too late to start changing, Ryan," she said, giving him a light touch on the shoulder. "Life has a funny way of giving us opportunities to be better. We just have to be willing to take them." The two of them stayed there for a while, talking about things that Ryan never imagined he'd discuss with anyone. Rachel made him feel at ease, not because she wanted something from him, but because she treated him as a human being, with all his flaws and potential. Ryan felt vulnerable, but for the first time, it didn't seem bad. Later that night, while most of the guests were in the main hall having fun, Ryan found himself reflecting on Rachel and everything she had said. For the first time, he realized that the problem wasn't her not fitting into his life, but rather him needing to change his own perspective to deserve her. Rachel made him question who he was and what really mattered. More than wanting to win her over, Ryan began to realize that he wanted to be someone worthy of standing beside her. And that was a change he never imagined he'd have to make. That conversation by the pool marked the beginning of something much bigger. Ryan was falling in love, not with a pretty face or someone he could show off as a trophy, but with a real person who made him want to be better, who challenged him to look beyond the superficial. And at that moment, he began to understand that love wasn't something you chose for convenience or appearance. It was something that transformed you from the inside out. The day of the final decision had arrived, and the atmosphere in the mansion was charged with anticipation. After a week full of challenges, intrigue, and emotions, all the participants were anxious about the outcome of the contest. That moment would determine not only who would stay by Ryan's side, but also mark the culmination of everyone's personal journey there. Everyone, including Ryan himself, was in suspense over how this story would end. Ryan had spent the last few days deeply reflecting on everything he had experienced during the contest. Every conversation with Rachel, every gesture, and every challenge had made him see something new about himself. He had entered this game believing he had all the answers, that he was the one in control, but now he found himself disarmed by someone who challenged not his rules, but his values. Rachel had taught him to see beyond the surface, and more importantly, she had made him realize his own vulnerabilities and accept them. The ceremony was ready to begin. In the mansion's main hall, a space had been impeccably decorated with soft lights and an atmosphere that evoked the elegance and sophistication that Ryan had always insisted on maintaining. The finalists stood in a semicircle, waiting for Ryan to make his choice. The expressions on the other candidates' faces were filled with expectation, mixed with nervousness. They all seemed to have an idea of what was about to happen, but no one, not even Rachel, knew exactly what Ryan's decision would be. Ryan entered the room, dressed in a dark suit that fit him perfectly. His expression was serious, but unlike at the beginning of the contest, there was a softness in his eyes, a vulnerability he no longer felt the need to hide. He approached the group and took a deep breath before speaking, looking at each of the women standing there. Finally, his eyes settled on Rachel. "I'd like to thank all of you for being part of this experience," Ryan began, his voice calmer and deeper than usual. "At the beginning, I thought all of this would be simple, that I would just choose the woman who best fit my plans, who had the beauty and the ideal profile to be by my side. But over the past week, something changed. I changed. He paused and his eyes met Rachel's, who was watching him attentively, but with a hint of skepticism. She was not there to be chosen as a trophy, and Ryan knew that now. He took a deep breath before continuing. Rachel, you showed me something I never imagined I needed to see. Ryan began to approach her, ignoring the cameras and the looks from those around. You made me realize that a person's worth isn't in how perfect they seem, but in how true they are. You didn't try to please me. You didn't try to be what I wanted. You were simply yourself, and that made me realize how much I need to change to be someone worthy of being with someone like you. Ryan's words hung in the air, and Rachel's expression softened. This wasn't the speech of a man in love trying to impress. It was a man shedding his arrogance, finally being honest with himself. Rachel could feel the sincerity in every word. She knew Ryan had a long way to go, but this was proof that he was willing to try. I choose you, Rachel, Ryan declared, his voice filled with emotion. Not because you won the contest, but because you made me want to be better, and because, for the first time, I genuinely want to get to know someone, without masks or games. I want to start this with you, but I understand if you don't feel the same way. Rachel took a deep breath, emotion subtly crossing her face. She smiled, not the smile of someone who had won a competition, but a smile that carried a mix of understanding, affection, and hope. Ryan, I didn't come here to be chosen by someone, she began, her voice calm. I came here to challenge myself, to show myself that there are no limits that define me. And in a way, you challenged yourself too. I see that you're willing to change, and that means a lot to me. I'm willing to give this a chance, but on one condition. I want this to be a journey as equals. No games, no tests, just the two of us, being ourselves. Ryan nodded, feeling an immense weight lifting from his shoulders. He knew it wouldn't be easy. He knew he would still have to deal with his flaws and learn to be vulnerable. But for the first time, he was willing to try. Not because it was convenient, but because Rachel was worth the effort. The two of them moved closer, and in a gentle gesture, Ryan took Rachel's hand. Applause from the other contestants and the guests echoed through the room, but for Ryan, everything else seemed secondary. The world around them became a distant noise as he looked into Rachel's eyes and saw something he had never seen before. Not just love, but a real chance at transformation, at finding something genuine that he never knew he was looking for. And so, the contest ended in a way no one expected. The millionaire Ryan, who always believed he could buy or conquer everything he wanted, learned that the true value of life isn't found in possessions or appearances, but in the ability to truly connect with another person. Rachel, in turn, had proven that the limitations others place on us only have power if we allow them. They weren't perfect, and they knew it, but they were willing to move forward together, each helping the other grow and transform. And so the story of an arrogant millionaire and a determined woman became not a story of a simple choice, but of mutual transformation and hope in what is possible when we choose to look beyond what the eyes see and open our hearts. If you enjoyed this story of transformation, true love, and overcoming obstacles, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. Share it with your friends and comment below what you think about Ryan and Rachel's journey. Do you believe that love can change people for the better? Your opinion is very important to us. See you in the next story, full of drama, emotion, and life lessons. Stay tuned and remember, sometimes the greatest changes come from the people we least expect.